Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Nadia. Tonight, we begin with the worsening crisis in Gaza, where at least 107 people have been killed in the past 24 hours as Israeli strikes and ground operations continue. More than 53,700 people people are now confirmed dead since the conflict began in October, with over 121,000 injured. Only 19 of Gaza's 36 hospitals remain even partially operational. Medical supplies are running dangerously low and access to treatment is severely limited. Aid agencies are warning of a growing hunger emergency. Over 70,000 children under the age of 5 are now at the risk of acute malnutrition. While Israel over 107 humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza in the past day. That number remains far below the pre-war average of 500 trucks daily. The Israeli military has issued fresh evacuation orders for Jabalia and 13 other neighborhoods in the north, ahead of what's expected to be the intensified operations in the coming days. International pressure is growing. The UK, France, and Canada also have called for an immediate ceasefire and urgent access for humanitarian relief. Meanwhile, political tensions are deepening in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under growing criticism, including over his decision to dismiss the head of domestic intelligence while war investigations continue. The situation remains critical, and aid agencies say the next few days will be vital in determining how much support can reach civilians trapped by the fighting. Now we will move on to the Ukrainian update. And tonight, the war in Ukraine remains high on the international agenda as G7 financial ministers issue a fresh warning to Russia. In a joint statement, they condemned what they called Russia's continual brutal war and said that if efforts to reach a ceasefire fail, they will consider all options, including further sanctions. Ukraine's former military chief, Valery Zaluzhy, now ambassador to London, has warned that the idea of returning to Ukraine's 1991 or even pre-2022 borders may no longer be realistic. Speaking at a forum in Kiev, he said Russia still has the capability to launch new strikes and offensive operations, and he urged Ukrainians not to wait for what he called a miracle. Meanwhile, Germany has formally established its first permanent overseas military base since the Second World War. A 5,000-strong armored brigade will be based in Lithuania as part of NATO's efforts to reinforce an eastern flank in response to Russia's invasion. In Moscow, Russia has named a new ground forces commander, General Andrei Mordevik, previously known for leading operations during the siege of Mariupol. He replaces General Oleg Zaluzhov on the ground. Russia says it shot down 115 Ukrainian drones in just 12 hours, including around 20 headed for Moscow. Flights were briefly suspended at 3 major airports in the capital. And in Europe, trade tensions are rising. The EU has announced temporary restrictions on Ukrainian agricultural imports after failing to agree a new trade deal. Meanwhile, EU lawmakers have voted to impose tariffs on Russian fertilizers beginning in July, a move aimed at weakening Moscow's war finances despite concerns over rising prices. The situation across Ukraine remains complex, with the growing concern about the long-term direction of the war and the international will to contain it. Now we will move on to the energy bills. UK energy bills to drop. UK energy bills will drop in July due to failing gas prices, but experts and politicians say long-term reform is needed to ease household pressures. From 1st of July, the average UK household energy bill will fall by around £129 after Ofgem confirmed a 7% cut to the energy price cap. The new annual average for dual fuel bills will sit at £1,720, the lowest level in 2 years. The reduction has been driven primarily by a fall in the wholesale gas prices, which still heavily influence electricity cost under the UK's pricing system. Despite the drop, bills remain significantly higher than pre-crisis levels, and the UK continues to rank among the most expensive countries in Europe for household electricity. Consumer groups have warned that this slight fall offers limited relief to households still dealing with the debt and high living cost. Dame Claire Moretti, Chief Executive of Citizens Advice, said the announcement would be cold comfort to millions still repaying energy arrears but built up over the past 2 years. Economists are also cautious. PwC has warned that bills could rise again this winter as demand increases and energy usage spikes. In response to the announcement, the S&P has criticized the UK government from what it describes as a failure to deliver lasting reductions. S&P Energy spokesperson Dave Dugan pointed out that even with the July's cut, bills remain 152 higher than when the Labour government took office. The party argues that 3 price increase since the election have effectively wiped out Labour's pledge to cut bills by £300. The S&P is calling for more investments in Scotland's energy sector, a permanent reduction in standing charges, and the full reinstatement of the winter fuel payment. They also continues to press for deeper structural reforms to ensure Scotland, a net exporter of renewable energy, benefits more directly from its natural resources, with many households still struggling and warnings of further volatility ahead. The debate over how energy is priced and who benefits is far from over. Now we will move on to the doctors in England strike. The doctors in England are being balloted over strike action following a 4% pay offer, while NHS staff and doctors in Scotland have secured high increases. Doctors in England could soon walk out again after the British Medical Association announced a fresh ballot on industrial action. The move follows a 4% pay offer from the UK government, which doctors say fails to make up for more than a decade of falling pay in real terms. The ballot opens on 27 May and will run until early July. The proposed uplift comes after junior doctors in England previously secured a 22% of pay rise over 2 years to end last year's strikes. However, the BMA argues that more is needed to reach their goal of restoring pay to 2008 levels by 2027. In Scotland, doctors and NHS staff have reached separate agreements following direct negotiations with the Scottish Government. Junior doctors accepted an 11% rise for 2024 to 2025, delivered in 2 stages, 8.5% backdated to April and further 2.3% from October. That deal is part of wider strategy to improve long-term pay and conditions. Specialty and associate specialist doctors in Scotland also secured increases of between 6% and 10%, depending on grade. These doctors, while not consultants, carry out high-level clinical work and often lead patient care in hospitals. Beyond medical staff, a broader 2-year deal covering NHS Scotland workers, including nurses, midwives and paramedics, will deliver an increase 8%, along with a pay guarantee that keeps wages above inflation. These agreements were reached through direct talks rather than the UK's pay review body process, which unions in Scotland have described as slower and less responsive. While discussions continue in England, the contrasting outcomes across the devolved nations highlight the different approaches to NHS pay and workforce relations. With ballots underway, the situation in England remains uncertain and the possibility of renewed disruption in services has not been ruled out. Now we will move on to Trump's proposes 50% tariff on EU goods. Donald Trump has proposed a 50% tariff on goods from the European Union, sparking market jitters and raising concerns about a renewed global trade conflict. The current US President Donald Trump has announced he is recommending a 50% tariff on goods imported from the European Union starting on June 1. He claims the measure is necessary due to what he describes as persistent trade imbalances and unfair practices by the EU. The statement made via his social media platform accuses the European Union of erecting trade barriers, manipulating currency, and levying penalties on American companies. Trump said negotiations with the EU has stalled, and he believes a tariff is now the only way to address what he called a one-sided relationship. Markets reacted swiftly. US stock futures dropped, and European shares also fell amid growing investor concern. Analysts say such a tariff could push up consumer prices, disrupt transatlantic supply chains, and lead to retaliatory measures from the EU. The proposed 50% duty would not apply to goods manufactured in the United States, a point Trump emphasized in his announcement. However, experts warn that a sudden and sweeping tariff of this size could have unintended consequences, including increased costs for US businesses that rely on the imported components. There has been no immediate official response from the European Union, but trade experts expect Brussels to consider reciprocal tariffs if the US measure goes ahead. The UK, no longer part of the EU, is not directly targeted by the proposal. Some observers suggest that this might offer a temporary advantage for British exporters, though wider economic uncertainty could still have knock-on effects. With global markets on alert, attention now turns to whether the proposal will be enacted and how the EU might respond. Now we will move on to the uranium discharges, which has sparked the concern. The Environmental Agency allowed uranium discharges into the protected English estuary. Labour's nuclear expansion plans raise fresh concerns about radioactive waste and environmental safety. Over the past 9 years, more than 3 tons of uranium have been legally discharged into the River Ribble estuary in Lancashire, one of the most protected environmental sites in the UK. The material came from the Springfields Fuels nuclear fuel factory near Preston, which processes uranium into fuel rods for nuclear reactors. The highest discharge occurred in 2015 when more than 700 kilograms of uranium entered the water. The discharge point lies within the designated marine conservation zone and just upstream of the Ribble estuary, which is protected under multiple conservation designations due to its ecological importance. Although the Environment Agency insists the discharges remain within the radiation safety limits for the public, experts have raised concerns over potential risk to the local environment. Critics have questioned the modelling used to justify the discharge limits and have described the quantity released as usually high. The revelations came at a time when the UK Labour government is advancing plans to expand the country's nuclear energy capacity. This includes a new generation of smaller nuclear power stations known as small modular reactors or SMRs, which the government hopes to deploy across the UK, including in Scotland. However, there is growing concern among scientists and environmentalists that SMRs may produce more radioactive waste per unit of electricity than older, larger nuclear reactors. This is due to design differences that can result in less efficient fuel use and increased neutron leakage. In Scotland, nuclear expansion remains a controversial issue. The Scottish government continued to oppose a new nuclear developments, favouring investment in renewable energy. Despite this, political and industrial pressure has grown for SMR deployment north of the border, particularly as the UK seeks to strengthen energy security and reduce carbon emissions. As debate continues, the challenge remains to reconcile the push for nuclear energy with the need for strict environmental protections and responsible waste management. Now, the next topic is Scottish Green proposes stronger powers to tackle housing crisis. The Scottish Green proposes strengthening local authority powers to repurpose long-term empty homes, addressing Scotland's housing crisis amid over 31,000 properties vacant for over a year. The Scottish Greens have submitted an amendment to the housing bill currently progressing through the Scottish Parliament, calling for stronger local authority powers to bring long-term empty and derelict homes back into use. According to recent government data, more than 43,000 properties in Scotland have been vacant for over 6 months, with around 31,600 of these empty for more than a year. The Greens argue that enabling council to act more effectively on such properties could ease pressure on the housing system and support community regeneration. The proposal builds on earlier measures supporting by the Greens, including the use of compulsory purchase orders to acquire unused properties for housing. The new amendment seeks to expand the range of powers available to local authorities, aiming to return more vacant homes to productive use, including greater flexibility over how repurposed properties are allocated or resold. The amendment was highlighted during a ministerial statement in the Scottish Parliament on the government's response to the housing emergency. The Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice indicated that the government would consider the proposals further. Scotland has declared a national housing emergency with the shortage of affordable homes, increasing homelessness and rising demand placing strain on the system. Empty homes have been identified by both local and national governments as potential part of the solution. Local authorities in urban areas have already begun taking more active roles in contacting owners of long-term vacant properties and encouraging reoccupation or sale. The Scottish Greens argue that legislative backing is needed to support these efforts and create a more robust, fairer housing market. If adopted, the amendment would mark a further step toward reforming land and housing use in Scotland, focusing on reducing waste in the existing housing stock and addressing inequality in housing access. A Scottish government proposal to allow councils to introduce a cruise ship levy is sparking debate over its potential impact on tourism and local services. The Scottish government is consulting on plans to give local authorities the power to introduce a levy on cruise ship visits. The proposal is part of wider efforts to help councils fund services used by tourists and address growing financial pressures. An estimated 1.2 million cruise passengers visited Scotland last year. In Invergordon, one of the country's busiest cruise ports, views are divided. Some residents and business owners fear a levy could put off visitors. Others argue it's a reasonable way to raise funds for infrastructure used by the cruise industry. The port of Cromarty Firth, which expects around 150,000 passengers this year, has voiced opposition. Port officials say cruise operators already pay docking fees and warn that an added charge such as £5 per passenger could increase cost by more than 20%. They suggest this might lead some operators to choose other destinations, risking a drop in visitor spending locally. Business owners reliant on cruise tourism echo these concerns, pointing out that many passengers spend over £100 per visit supporting jobs in retail, hospitality and transport. However, local authorities and some visitors take a different view. Highland Council, which is reviewing its position, says the tourism sector places additional strain on local infrastructure. The council is considering whether such a levy could provide sustainable funding to address these needs. Some visiting passengers have also said they would be happy to pay a small fee if it benefits the communities they visit. The Scottish Government has not set a specific amount or indicated whether the levy would be paid by passengers or operators. It says the money raised could support services like waste management, road maintenance and public facilities, or be allocated more broadly by councils. The consultation closes on the end of month. Highland Council is expected to discuss its response next week as the wider debate continues over how best to balance economic benefits from tourism with the local investment needs. Scotland's architectural achievements have been recognised as 11 outstanding projects are named winners in this year's National Awards for Design and Built Environment Excellence. Scotland's architectural talent in the spotlight following the announcement of this year's national awards from the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland. 11 projects have been honoured for their design, excellence, innovation and contribution to the nation's built environment, celebrating a diverse range of buildings from historic restorations to essential public infrastructure. Among the winners is HM Prison and Young Offender Institution Stirling, praised for its humane and forward-thinking design. The facility moves away from the traditional prison architecture with a strong focus on rehabilitation, mental health and well-being. Historical buildings also featured prominently in this year's honours. The restoration of Fairburn Tower, a 16th century tower house, has been recognised for its balance of heritage conservation and modern use. Aldori Castle, located on the shores of Loch Ness, was similarly commended for its sensitive and elegant renovation. Infrastructure projects were also celebrated. The Ganshiel Jubilee Bridge in Aberdeenshire received an award for its harmonious integration into landscape and its role to improving local transport links. All winning projects now move forward to the next stage of judging, where they will be considered for the prestigious Andrew Doolan Best Building in Scotland Award, to be announced later this year. These awards highlight Scotland's ongoing commitment to architectural quality, sustainable development, and the power of design to enhance communities across the country. Scotland's record-breaking dry spell ends tonight with heavy rain, hail, and thunder expected. But forecasters say it won't be enough to ease water shortages. Scotland's 5-week run of dry, settled weather is set to end this evening, just as we come on air in Glasgow, with forecasters warning of heavy rain, hail, and thunder across the weekend. After the driest start to the year since 1964, the incoming weather marks a dramatic change. But despite the downpours, water levels are still dangerously low in many areas. The Environment Agency (SEPA) says many parts of Scotland have seen no rainfall for more than a month. It warns that river levels remain well below normal and the rain expected over the next few days won't be enough to reverse the effect of Scotland's driest spring in decades. In Dumfriesshire, the River Esk is closing to being classified as facing significant water scarcity, and in Argyll, there are fresh warnings about landslides on A83 at the Rest and Be Thankful. As a precaution, traffic is being diverted onto the old military road from 8 p.m. tonight through until Tuesday. Roads authorities says the first heavy rain after a long dry spell is often the most dangerous, increasing the risk of landslips. Forecasters say we can expect frequent showers over the weekend with strong westerly winds and a risk of hail and thunder lasting into next week. Scotland's first ever Wellness and Music Festival is set to launch in Paisley, combining live music, movement and mindfulness in a community-focused celebration. Scotland is set to host its first ever Wellness and Music Festival and is coming to Paisley. Paisley Alive is scheduled to take place in 2026, blending live music with yoga, fitness and self-care activities in a festival experience designed to all ages. The event will feature performances from leading Scottish and UK acts set alongside daytime sessions focused on well-being and movement. The festival will be held in Barshaw Park, one of the Paisley's best-known green spaces. Proceeds from the event will be reinvested locally, specifically to restore and Park's historic bandstand, turning into a year-round venue for performances, weddings and community events. Organisers say they want the festival to reflect the spirit of the town. Local residents in Renfrewshire will receive priority ticket access and children under 12 will be able to attend for free. Behind the event is Renfrewshire entrepreneur and festival promoter Scott McFarlane, who says the aim is to create a feel-good experience that brings people together. Organisers are also inviting the local community to help shape the festival during its development phase. The announcement comes as Paisley continues its cultural revival. More than 100 million is being invested in the town's cultural infrastructure, including the museum and town hall. Organisers hope Paisley Alive will become a lasting part of that transformation, bringing energy, wellness, and live music together in an uplifting weekend. Well, that's it for this evening's Scotland at 7. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We were 16k short of our funding requirements in 2024, which has left us short of the money we need to pay our bills. We face cost of over 4,000 every month, but only receive a donations of around £2,500. We have raised over £7,000 this year so far, but we still urgently need to raise at least £5,000 to pay our bills now. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Goodbye and thank you for watching.